In a world where people are judged by their uniforms and the tools they carry, brilliance often hides in plain sight. Sometimes it's not in the polished shoes or pressed suits of professionals, but in the quiet strength of someone pushing a mop down a hallway. Her name was Denise Carter. She didn't wear a lab coat or hold a clipboard. She carried a bucket, a broom, and a past no one knew about. Denise worked as a janitor in a prestigious high school. To most people, she was invisible. She came early, stayed late, and made sure every hallway sparkled before the first bell and after the last. She never caused trouble, never talked back, and never asked for anything. Day after day, she moved through the halls like a shadow. Students passed her without a second glance. Teachers said thank you occasionally, but few knew her name. And none knew her story. Denise had worked there for almost a decade. She had memorized the layout of every classroom, every locker combination left open too often, every lunch tray left behind. She even knew which teachers were kind, and which ones let their pride get the better of them. And among them all, there was one name that echoed louder than the rest: Mr. Thomas Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds was the school's youngest calculus teacher. Fresh out of graduate school, full of ambition and opinions. He was sharp, quick-witted, and smug. He often joked that real intelligence could only be found in the complexity of mathematics. To him, calculus wasn't just a subject, it was a status symbol. A way to separate the intellectuals from the average. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the teacher's lounge was louder than usual. Mr. Reynolds was talking about a problem he'd given his advanced class, a particularly dense calculus equation, something designed to make even strong students pause. As teachers sipped coffee and nodded along, Reynolds wrote it on the whiteboard behind him, chuckling, "I bet even some of you can't solve this one. It's the kind of question that separates the thinkers from the dreamers." Just then the door opened, and in came Denise, dragging her cleaning cart. She nodded politely, avoided eye contact, and began tidying the tables and emptying the trash bins. Mr. Reynolds, in a moment of cocky amusement, gestured toward the whiteboard and joked, "Hey Denise, want to take a shot at this? Think you can solve a little calculus today?" Laughter followed. Not cruel laughter, just the kind that carries assumptions. The kind that says, "We know you can't, but wouldn't it be funny if you tried?" But Denise didn't laugh. She looked at the problem. Not with confusion. Not with fear. With recognition. She paused, then slowly walked over to the whiteboard. "Mind if I use your marker?" she asked, calm and poised. Reynolds, caught off guard, handed it to her with a smirk. "Be my guest." What happened next silenced the room. Denise stared at the equation for a moment, then began to write. Not with hesitation but with precision. Each line she wrote, each symbol she used, it was clear she knew exactly what she was doing. In less than 3 minutes the problem was solved. Perfectly. No one spoke. Mr. Reynolds blinked twice, reading the solution over and over again, trying to find an error. There was none. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, voice quieter now. Denise placed the marker back in his hand. "I studied applied mathematics," she replied softly. "Before life happened." The room stayed still. Later that day, a teacher who witnessed the event posted the story online. "Janitor at our school just solved a calculus problem that had us stumped. Turns out she's a math genius. This world really underestimates people." The post exploded. Within 48 hours, news stations were calling. People wanted to know who Denise Carter was. What was her story? How did a janitor solve college-level calculus faster than most math professors? But to understand Denise's brilliance, you had to go back. Years ago, Denise was a prodigy. She grew up in a working-class neighborhood where education wasn't always a priority. But Denise was different. By the age of 14, she was tutoring students 3 years older than her. She loved math, not just for the numbers, but for the way it made sense in a world that often didn't. She earned a scholarship to a top university. Started her degree in mathematics. Professors called her gifted. Some even said she'd go on to revolutionize how we teach complex concepts. But life had other plans. Her mother fell ill during her second year. Her younger siblings had no one else. Bills stacked up. And Denise made the hardest choice of her life. She left school to take care of her family. She promised herself she'd return one day. But that day never came. Years passed. She worked different jobs, waitress, cashier, cleaner, until she found a position as a janitor at Lincoln High School. It was stable, it was quiet, and most importantly, it allowed her to disappear. But her love for math never left. In her small apartment, she kept old notebooks, solved problems for fun, watched university lectures online. Every evening after cleaning she studied. Not for anyone else, for herself. So that moment in the teacher's lounge wasn't luck. It was years of quiet study. Years of brilliance hidden behind rubber gloves and a uniform. When her story spread, everything changed. Universities offered her positions. Math organizations invited her to speak. One professor said, "Her mind is something you see once in a generation." But Denise didn't take fame. She didn't want lights or applause. What she asked for was simple. She wanted to teach. Not in some Ivy League school. She asked to run free evening classes for underprivileged students, kids who didn't believe they were smart, who thought calculus was only for the elite. She taught them with patience, with heart, and with the passion of someone who had lived both the brilliance and the burden of intelligence. Students who once failed math now loved it. One girl said, "Miss Denise made me feel like I could do anything. Like my brain wasn't broken. Just waiting to be challenged." As for Mr. Reynolds, he learned his lesson too. He publicly apologized, not just to Denise but to his students, promising never to judge someone by their job title again. He even started attending her evening classes, sitting quietly in the back, listening, learning. Today, Denise Carter is more than a viral story. She's a symbol. A reminder that brilliance has no dress code. Genius isn't always loud. And sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't the one talking, but the one cleaning the floor. So the next time you walk past someone and assume you know their worth, pause. Cut to black screen with title. Teacher told black janitor to solve calculus as a joke, has no idea she's a math genius. In a world where people are judged by their uniforms and the tools they carry, brilliance often hides in plain sight. Sometimes it's not in the polished shoes or pressed suits of professionals, but in the quiet strength of someone pushing a mop down a hallway. Her name was Denise Carter. She didn't wear a lab coat or hold a clipboard. She carried a bucket, a broom, and a past no one knew about. Denise worked as a janitor in a prestigious high school. To most people she was invisible. She came early, stayed late, and made sure every hallway sparkled before the first bell and after the last. She never caused trouble, never talked back, and never asked for anything. Day after day, she moved through the halls like a shadow. Students passed her without a second glance. Teachers said thank you occasionally, but few knew her name. And none knew her story. Denise had worked there for almost a decade. She had memorized the layout of every classroom, every locker combination left open too often, every lunch tray left behind. She even knew which teachers were kind, and which ones let their pride get the better of them. And among them all, there was one name that echoed louder than the rest, Mr. Thomas Reynolds. Mr. Reynolds was the school's youngest calculus teacher. Fresh out of graduate school, full of ambition and opinions. He was sharp, quick-witted, and smug. He often joked that real intelligence could only be found in the complexity of mathematics. To him, calculus wasn't just a subject, it was a status symbol. A way to separate the intellectuals from the average. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, the teacher's lounge was louder than usual. Mr. Reynolds was talking about a problem he'd given his advanced class, a particularly dense calculus equation, something designed to make even strong students pause. As teachers sipped coffee and nodded along, Reynolds wrote it on the whiteboard behind him, chuckling, "I bet even some of you can't solve this one." It's the kind of question that separates the thinkers from the dreamers. Just then the door opened, and in came Denise, dragging her cleaning cart. She nodded politely, avoided eye contact, and began tidying the tables and emptying the trash bins. Mr. Reynolds, in a moment of cocky amusement, gestured toward the whiteboard and joked, "Hey Denise, want to take a shot at this? Think you can solve a little calculus today?" Laughter followed. Not cruel laughter, just the kind that carries assumptions. The kind that says, "We know you can't, but wouldn't it be funny if you tried?" But Denise didn't laugh. She looked at the problem. Not with confusion. Not with fear. With recognition. She paused, then slowly walked over to the whiteboard. "Mind if I use your marker?" she asked, calm and poised. Reynolds, caught off guard, handed it to her with a smirk. "Be my guest." What happened next silenced the room. Denise stared at the equation for a moment, then began to write. Not with hesitation but with precision. Each line she wrote, each symbol she used, it was clear she knew exactly what she was doing. In less than 3 minutes the problem was solved. Perfectly. No one spoke. Mr. Reynolds blinked twice, reading the solution over and over again, trying to find an error. There was none. "Where did you learn that?" he asked, voice quieter now. Denise placed the marker back in his hand. "I studied applied mathematics," she replied softly. "Before life happened." The room stayed still. Later that day, a teacher who witnessed the event posted the story online. "Janitor at our school just solved a calculus problem that had us stumped. Turns out she's a math genius. This world really underestimates people." The post exploded. Within 48 hours, news stations were calling. People wanted to know who Denise Carter was. What was her story? How did a janitor solve college-level calculus faster than most math professors? But to understand Denise's brilliance, you had to go back. Years ago, Denise was a prodigy. She grew up in a working-class neighborhood where education wasn't always a priority. But Denise was different. By the age of 14, she was tutoring students 3 years older than her. She loved math, not just for the numbers, but for the way it made sense in a world that often didn't. She earned a scholarship to a top university. Started her degree in mathematics. Professors called her gifted. Some even said she'd go on to revolutionize how we teach complex concepts. But life had other plans. Her mother fell ill during her second year. Her younger siblings had no one else. Bills stacked up. And Denise made the hardest choice of her life. She left school to take care of her family. She promised herself she'd return one day. But that day never came. Years passed. She worked different jobs, waitress, cashier, cleaner. Until she found a position as a janitor at Lincoln High School. It was stable, it was quiet, and most importantly, it allowed her to disappear. But her love for math never left. In her small apartment, she kept old notebooks. Solved problems for fun. Watched university lectures online. Every evening after cleaning she studied. Not for anyone else, for herself. So that moment in the teacher's lounge wasn't luck. It was years of quiet study. Years of brilliance hidden behind rubber gloves and a uniform. When her story spread, everything changed. Universities offered her positions. Math organizations invited her to speak. One professor said, "Her mind is something you see once in a generation." But Denise didn't take fame. She didn't want lights or applause. What she asked for was simple. She wanted to teach. Not in some Ivy League school. She asked to run free evening classes for underprivileged students, kids who didn't believe they were smart, who thought calculus was only for the elite. She taught them with patience, with heart, and with the passion of someone who had lived both the brilliance and the burden of intelligence. Students who once failed math now loved it. One girl said, "Miss Denise made me feel like I could do anything. Like my brain wasn't broken. Just waiting to be challenged." As for Mr. Reynolds, he learned his lesson too. He publicly apologized, not just to Denise but to his students, promising never to judge someone by their job title again. He even started attending her evening classes, sitting quietly in the back, listening, learning. Today, Denise Carter is more than a viral story. She's a symbol. A reminder that brilliance has no dress code. Genius isn't always loud. And sometimes the smartest person in the room isn't the one talking, but the one cleaning the floor. So the next time you walk past someone and assume you know their worth, paused. It was just another ordinary day at Lincoln High School, or so it seemed. The students were going through the motions, barely paying attention as the clock ticked away. In the back of the room, Maya Benson, the janitor, was quietly sweeping the floor. She had worked at the school for years, and most of the students barely noticed her. She kept to herself, doing her job with quiet efficiency. That day Mrs. Langford, the teacher, had a bit of a mischievous streak. She was known for making jokes at the expense of her students, but this time, she decided to target someone else. The news about Maya spread through the school like wildfire. Students whispered in the hallways. Teachers exchanged glances in the staff room. Some even rewatched the footage a student had secretly recorded on their phone, unable to believe what they'd seen. By the end of the week, Maya had become a quiet legend. But she continued her duties like nothing had changed. Each morning, she arrived before sunrise, cleaned the halls, scrubbed the desks, and kept her head down. It was as if solving that calculus problem had never happened. But things were changing. One morning, Principal Harris called Maya into his office. He stood up from his desk as she entered, unsure how to greet her, as a janitor or as something more. "Maya," he began, "I think we need to talk." She sat down quietly. "Why didn't you ever tell us?" he asked, gently. Maya offered a faint smile. "Because I didn't think it mattered anymore." Principal Harris furrowed his brow. "It does matter. You solved something most of our top students struggle with. You corrected one of our best math teachers. You clearly don't belong in this position." Maya looked down at her hands, calloused from years of physical work. "Once upon a time, I was a professor at Morehouse. I taught advanced mathematics. But life," she paused, swallowing hard, "life has a way of changing course. I lost my husband. My daughter got sick. I couldn't keep up with the bills, so I took whatever work I could find." The room went silent. "I didn't want pity," she added. "I just needed peace." Principal Harris sat back, stunned. "You're more than qualified to teach here, Maya. If you're interested, I'd like to offer you a position, as a guest lecturer at least to start." Maya's eyes widened. It had been years since she had stood in front of a class. But deep down the fire never went out. "I'll think about it," she said softly. That Monday, word spread that Maya Benson would be assisting in the advanced calculus class. Students who never cared for math suddenly showed up early, pencils sharp, notebooks open. She walked into the classroom, not in a jumpsuit, but in a simple cardigan and slacks. The room fell silent. She didn't say much at first. Just picked up a marker and wrote on the board. "Math is the language of truth. Let's speak it." And just like that, Maya Benson, once the janitor, was a teacher again. But her story was far from over. Because one day, a stranger would come knocking at the school doors, a man from a well-known university who had seen the viral video and had questions of his own. And with him, came an offer that could change everything. Weeks passed. Maya Benson, once known only as the school janitor, had now become the heart of Lincoln High's advanced math program. Her quiet strength and razor-sharp mind inspired students in ways no textbook ever could. She never asked for praise. She didn't boast about her past. But when she stood before that whiteboard, it was clear she belonged there. Her classes weren't just about numbers and formulas. She told stories behind the theorems, connected ancient mathematicians to modern problems, and made every student feel like they were part of something greater. Students who once failed algebra were now begging to sit in on her lectures. She unlocked minds. She lit sparks. But Maya never forgot why she came to Lincoln High in the first place. Each evening after class, she would change back into her janitor's uniform and continue her custodial duties. Not because she had to, but because it reminded her of the journey. It reminded her of humility, of loss, of resilience. Then one day, a black car pulled into the school parking lot. Out stepped a man in his mid-40s, dressed in a charcoal grey suit and glasses. He walked into the front office, holding a brown leather briefcase. His name was Dr. Elijah Brooks, and he was the chair of mathematics at Stanford University. He had seen the viral video of Maya solving the calculus problem months ago, but unlike others who had forgotten the trend, Elijah had done his research. He tracked down her academic papers, lectures, and even a few journal entries that bore the name Dr. Maya J. Benson. He couldn't believe it. The same woman who had published one of the most cited papers on multidimensional vector fields had been missing from academia for over a decade, and now she was teaching at a high school in Georgia. Dr. Brooks knocked gently on the classroom door during one of Maya's sessions. She looked up, surprised. The face was familiar, but older now. Elijah stepped inside. "Maya," he said with a smile. "It's been a long time." The students glanced around. There was a strange tension in the air, part curiosity, part reverence. Maya blinked. "Elijah?" He nodded. "Can we talk?" Later in the teacher's lounge, they sat together over coffee. "You disappeared," he said quietly. "One day you were presenting at MIT, the next, gone. We tried to find you." Maya looked away. "My daughter was diagnosed with leukemia. My husband lost his job. I couldn't balance teaching, caregiving, and the bills. I had to step away." Elijah paused, taking it all in. "I'm sorry. Truly." Maya nodded, her voice steady. "It changed me. But I never stopped doing math. I did it in notebooks on napkins in my head while scrubbing floors." Elijah opened his briefcase and slid a folder across the table. "There's a fellowship program at Stanford for underrepresented mathematicians with unique life paths. It's named after Dr. Kamala Winters, another brilliant mind who took a non-traditional journey. I want you to apply. Or better yet, skip the application. Join us. Full-time. Research. Lecturing. Your own team." Maya's hands trembled slightly as she held the folder. It felt surreal. Like a ghost from her past had suddenly extended a hand. I don't know," she whispered. "My life is here now. These students, they need me." Elijah leaned in. "Maya, the world needs you. What you've done here is extraordinary. But imagine what you could do with a global platform. Imagine mentoring a new generation of mathematicians, publishing again, standing before the world as the mind you've always been." She looked out the window. The sun was setting behind the schoolyard. Kids were laughing, playing, heading home with their backpacks. "I need time," she said finally. Elijah smiled. "Take it. But don't wait too long. Brilliance like yours doesn't belong in the shadows." That night, Maya sat alone at her kitchen table, the folder unopened beside her. Her old journals lay stacked in a box in the corner, proofs, formulas, dreams that never saw the light of day. Her daughter's photo smiled at her from the fridge door. Her husband's old sweater hung on the back of a chair. She had spent so many years surviving. Maybe it was time to live again. But how could she leave the students who believed in her? Who looked up to her? How could she turn her back on the very place that reminded her what she was made of? The decision weighed heavy on her heart. Maya moved through her routine as always, cleaning the hallways before dawn, lecturing students with contagious passion by midday, and mopping floors when the building emptied in the evening. But something had changed. Everyone noticed. Her students picked up on the shift in her energy, the faraway look in her eyes, the quiet pauses between lessons. Rumors had already begun to swirl. The man in the grey suit wasn't just a visitor, he was someone important, someone offering Maya a future far beyond the school walls. During one class, as she finished graphing a complex parabola on the board, a hand slowly raised from the middle row. It was Jordan, one of her brightest students. "Miss Benson," he said, hesitant, "is it true? Are you leaving us?" The room went silent. Even the usual back row jokers sat still. Maya paused, turning to face them. "I haven't made a decision yet," she said carefully. "But an opportunity has been offered. One I never thought I'd see again." "Then you should take it," said another student, quietly but firmly. Maya blinked, surprised. "You changed everything for us," said Olivia from the front row. "You made us believe math was more than just numbers. You made us believe we were more than just students." "I never thought I'd be good at anything," Jordan added. "Until you showed me I was. You gave us something most teachers never did, a reason to dream. And if you have a chance to live your dream again, you should take it." A silence hung in the air. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. That night, she sat at her kitchen table once more, same chair, same folder, but this time, her hands reached for it. Inside were papers detailing the Kamala Winters Fellowship. It came with housing, research grants, and access to the most advanced mathematical resources in the world. At the bottom of the packet was a handwritten note from Elijah. "Some journeys begin again in the middle. You've done enough surviving. It's time to rise." She closed her eyes and whispered to the empty room, "What would you do, baby girl?" A soft wind rustled the curtain as if answering. Her daughter's laugh echoed in her memory, the way she used to bounce up and down whenever Maya solved a math problem on the fridge whiteboard. "Mommy, you're the smartest in the world." Maya smiled through the tears. The next morning, Maya requested a meeting with Principal Harris. He greeted her with a warm nod. "I've heard the rumors," he said. "I suppose they're true." Maya handed him the folder. "I want to accept the fellowship," she said. "But I also want to stay connected to Lincoln High. These students, they're part of me now." Harris opened the folder and scanned the contents. "This is incredible, Maya. I won't lie, we'll miss you like hell. But this is where you belong." She nodded. "Maybe I can do guest lectures remotely, start a mentorship pipeline for students here who want to pursue math seriously. Something lasting." He smiled. "You're already building a legacy. This just adds fuel to it." 3 weeks later, a farewell assembly was held in the school auditorium. Students filled every seat, many holding handmade signs. "We love you, Miss Benson. The genius who mopped our floors. Maya equals legend." When she stepped on stage, the applause was deafening. She looked out at the sea of faces, many of them kids who once slouched in their seats, now sitting tall and proud. "I came here looking for quiet," she said. "But you gave me purpose. You reminded me of who I was and who I still am. I may be heading west to Stanford, but I'll carry Lincoln High in every proof I write, every lecture I give, and every young mathematician I meet. Because you are my inspiration." Tears fell, but so did laughter. The auditorium felt more like a family reunion than a farewell. Weeks turned into months. At Stanford, Maya returned to the chalkboards she once ruled. Her old papers resurfaced in global math conferences. TED Talks requested her. Think tanks called her. Her inbox overflowed. But every Friday afternoon, she blocked off time for her Lincoln Hour, virtual mentoring sessions with students back home. And in the halls of Lincoln High, students walked past a newly installed plaque, right outside the math wing. The Maya Benson Math and Science Center. In honor of the janitor who solved more than equations, she solved lives. But Maya's story doesn't end there. One morning, as she arrived at her new office, she found a letter waiting for her, no sender name, no address. Just a small envelope with one handwritten line. "You inspired me to believe again. I'm solving problems just like you." Inside was a photo, a teenage girl at a whiteboard, solving a complex matrix with a big proud smile on her face. Maya held it close to her heart. Because the greatest equations are the ones written in people's lives. Maya's days at Stanford were unlike anything she had experienced in over a decade. The pace was intense, the challenges fierce, but she thrived. Her lectures were packed. Her research papers were shared across international universities. But more than anything, her story resonated. The world was fascinated by the brilliant woman who had mopped floors by day and solved calculus by night. Soon invitations poured in from around the globe: Ghana, Brazil, South Korea, the UK, all wanting her to speak, teach, consult. But she remained grounded. For Maya, it was never about fame. It was about purpose. Every Friday, without fail, she still met virtually with her Lincoln High students. They called the sessions Math with Maya, and students from other schools began joining too, even some who had failed math multiple times. With Maya's help, they started seeing numbers differently. She didn't just teach math, she taught hope. One chilly October morning, after giving a guest lecture at a STEM conference in Chicago, Maya sat in a quiet cafe near the university. She had just finished responding to student messages when her phone buzzed. It was an email. Subject: Request for help, gifted student in trouble. From Mrs. Holloway, Guidance Counselor, Northside Correctional Facility School Program. Maya raised an eyebrow. She clicked it open. Dr. Benson. I run a small education program within the Northside Correctional Youth Facility. One of my students, 17 years old, is serving time for a nonviolent offense. But here's the thing, he's solving college-level calculus problems without formal training. He said he watched your videos on a contraband phone. Would you consider speaking with him? Even once? I believe you might be the spark he needs. Respectfully, Mrs. Denise Holloway. Maya stared at the screen, motionless. Her heart beat faster. She replied with one word: yes. A week later, Maya walked through the gates of Northside. She was led through a maze of grey hallways to a small classroom behind locked doors. Inside, seated alone at a desk, was a tall boy with sharp eyes and a guarded expression. His name was Devon Carter. He looked up as Maya entered. "You're really her," he muttered, almost in disbelief. "I get that a lot," Maya smiled, taking a seat across from him. On the desk was a sheet of paper covered in numbers and symbols. A partial solution to a problem Maya had written in one of her lectures 6 months earlier, an unsolved equation she had designed just to challenge her viewers. "You were close," she said, scanning the work. "Mr. Sign Flip here." Months passed and Maya Benson's name became a beacon in the academic world, not just for her mathematical brilliance, but for the way she rewrote what it meant to be a teacher, a mentor, a force of change. But she wasn't chasing awards or praise. She was chasing impact. Devon Carter, once an overlooked youth behind bars, was now completing college-level coursework with Maya's personal guidance. He had earned early release through a partnership between Stanford and Northside's education program. Maya personally funded his relocation, housing, and tutoring. People said it was too much for one student. But she saw it differently. She saw herself in him. One night, Maya sat at her desk in her Stanford office, reviewing her lecture notes for an international conference in Paris. A knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Dr. Elijah Brooks, her old colleague and the one who had brought her back into the academic light. "Maya," he said, stepping in, "you're not going to believe this." He handed her a large envelope stamped with a golden seal. She opened it slowly. Inside was a formal letter. The United Nations Council on Global Education is establishing the first-ever World Institute for Mathematical Empowerment. They've selected you as the founding director. Location: Accra, Ghana. Funded by multiple nations. Staffed by top educators and mentors from around the globe. The mission: to find, uplift and equip hidden math talent from underserved communities worldwide. They want you to build it. Maya sat back in her chair, stunned. "This isn't just a school," Elijah said. "It's a movement." She stared at the letter, her eyes misting over. For years, she had carried her brilliance like a quiet torch. Now, that flame had ignited something far greater. A year later, the world watched as Maya Benson stood at a podium under the blazing Ghanaian sun. Behind her stood the newly constructed Benson Global Institute for Mathematics and Discovery, BGIMD, a stunning campus blending traditional African architecture with cutting-edge technology. Students from 42 countries filled the courtyard, some barefoot, some in uniform, all with sharp minds and dreams that had once seemed unreachable. And standing in the front row was Devon, wearing a mentor's badge and holding a clipboard. Maya adjusted the mic. Today, we prove that genius does not come with wealth or status. It doesn't live only in private schools or Ivy League towers. Genius is born in the slums, in the shadows, in the silence. Our job is to find it, nurture it, and set it free. Applause thundered through the air, but Maya wasn't done. This institute is not about me. It's about the janitor hiding inside a math genius. The prisoner hiding a professor. The child who sees numbers dancing but is told to sit down and be quiet. To them, I say, your time is now. The years that followed were nothing short of revolutionary. Under Maya's leadership, thousands of underprivileged children, many without formal schooling, were trained in advanced mathematics and data science. Former students became mentors, teachers, engineers, and leaders across continents. The BGIMD model was replicated in South America, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East. Universities began recruiting from the institute, offering full scholarships to teens who once didn't have a pair of shoes. Devon became a lead instructor and traveled to prisons, shelters, and refugee camps, finding and guiding young minds the same way Maya had found him. One evening, Maya walked through the quiet halls of BGIMD Ghana. She paused by the institute's main wall. Etched into the stone were names of the first 100 students, carved forever into history. She ran her fingers along the names, her heart full. As she turned to leave, she saw a young girl sitting alone at a table, scribbling something furiously in a notebook. Maya approached gently. "What are you working on?" The girl looked up, eyes wide. "I'm trying to write a new proof. One that nobody's solved yet." Maya smiled. "And what do you plan to do once you solve it?" The girl's answer was simple. "Find someone else like me, and show them how to see." Maya nodded, eyes gleaming. The torch had passed. And now, the fire was unstoppable. 5 years after the grand opening of the Benson Global Institute for Mathematics and Discovery, BGIMD, Maya Benson had become a symbol not just of educational transformation, but of resilience against systems built to exclude brilliance. But with growth came new challenges. The world was changing fast. Political instability in parts of Africa, economic downturns, and social unrest were putting pressure on programs like BGIMD. Funding slowed. Several satellite campuses in South America were forced to pause operations. Critics began asking hard questions. Are these kinds of programs sustainable? Is it worth investing in genius when basic education systems are crumbling? For the first time in years, Maya felt that familiar weight, not of personal doubt but of responsibility. In early spring, a confidential report landed on her desk. A private investor who had initially backed BGIMD's expansion into Brazil had withdrawn support. A key donor from the European Union was shifting funding into artificial intelligence research, ignoring human education efforts. And a tech giant that once pledged $30 million had quietly ghosted the project. The worst part? One of the main campuses in Nairobi was on the brink of shutting down. Maya stared at the map on her wall. Each dot represented young lives, families, communities that had been transformed. She wasn't going to let that vanish without a fight. She called a staff meeting. "Everyone in the world is watching," she said, standing in front of a global Zoom screen full of faces from 5 continents. "They are waiting to see if we fade like a passing trend. But we are not a trend. We are a revolution." Devon, now the Institute's deputy director, spoke up. "So what's the play, Maya?" She looked into the camera. "We build louder. We rise harder. And we tell the stories they can't ignore." The next few weeks became a storm of action. Maya launched a campaign called The Hidden Equation, a media project spotlighting real lives transformed by BGIMD. A former student in Colombia, who had been a child laborer and was now developing renewable energy models. A Syrian refugee girl who built a math-based language learning app for trauma-affected children. A blind student from Mumbai who mastered abstract algebra using sound patterns. Each story exploded online. Documentaries were made. Celebrities tweeted support. The UN reconfirmed its funding. But something even more surprising happened. Ordinary people, teachers, single mothers, retired engineers, began donating what little they could to keep the movement alive. But the most emotional moment came during the Global Mathematics Summit in Geneva, where Maya was set to speak. As she walked on stage, the crowd stood. Not for her credentials, but for what she represented. She took a deep breath and began. I started this journey not as a professor, but as a janitor. People saw me pushing a mop and never imagined I could push equations beyond the boundaries of known mathematics. But I am here. It had been almost a decade since Maya Benson's life transformed from a mop-wielding janitor solving equations in secret to one of the most influential mathematical minds on the planet. She had built schools, mentored thousands, shaken hands with presidents and activists alike. But what came next would take her into an entirely new dimension, one she never saw coming. It began with a letter. Not an email, not a message, an actual handwritten letter on aged parchment, sealed with wax. It arrived at the main office of the Benson Global Institute in Accra, with no return address. The front reads simply, "To Dr. Maya Benson, regarding the pattern of lights." Intrigued, Maya opened it. The letter contained a series of numbers. No introduction. No context. Just this. Greater than 13, 21, 34, 55, 89, 144, 233. Beneath it. The answer is not the next number. It's the hidden rhythm behind the visible sum. Come to Ethiopia. Maya stared at it for several minutes. Fibonacci sequence? Obviously. But the message hinted at something beyond mathematics, a pattern inside the pattern. And Ethiopia? What did that mean? Devon, now her closest advisor and co-founder of the Institute's think tank division, leaned over her desk after she shared the letter. Sounds like a wild goose chase. Or a door, Maya said softly. 2 weeks later, Lalibela, Ethiopia. Lalibela was known for its 12th-century rock-hewn churches, carved into the earth as though God himself had drawn blueprints in stone. Maya, along with a small trusted team, arrived under the cover of a quiet morning, drawn by coordinates embedded in the letter's ink, a hidden layer revealed only under UV light. They met an elderly monk named Tewodros, who greeted Maya by name. "I have waited years," he said in a voice that cracked like dry paper, "for the one who would see the pattern beyond numbers." He led them to a library deep beneath the church, older than the Vatican archives, untouched by colonizers or digital scanners. There, Maya discovered something astonishing. Mathematical manuscripts predating European texts by centuries. The calculations included early forms of trigonometry, wave theory, even binary patterns, embedded within ancient poetry and art. But that wasn't all. Tewodros handed Maya a leather-bound tome. Inside, a system of math that accounted for dimensions beyond the physical, patterns in emotion, memory, and consciousness. It was theory, yes, but deeply complex. It mapped human intuition like an equation. Maya was stunned. "This isn't just math," she whispered. "It's a language of the soul." The discovery heard round the world. News of the Ethiopian Codex sent shockwaves through the global scientific community. Critics called it mysticism. But Maya proved otherwise. She and her team began translating the ancient models into modern frameworks. The results were profound. A new kind of algorithm emerged, capable of recognizing emotional patterns in human behavior more accurately than any AI model before it. Mental health researchers, neuroscientists, and even philosophers rallied around Maya's work. The model became known as EQ code, emotional quotient coding. She was invited to speak at the World Science Convergence in Tokyo. There she said, "For years, math was used to build machines and empires. But now, we're using it to understand pain, healing, and hope. The numbers speak, not just of things but of people." Meanwhile, at BGIMD Ghana, a new student had arrived. 11 years old. His name, Elijah Tomoa. From the moment he walked in, everyone knew something was different. He solved advanced geometry puzzles without tools. He created spatial projections using shadows and sound. But it wasn't just his intellect. He didn't speak. Not out of trauma but choice. Elijah had never uttered a word. Yet somehow he understood everything. Maya met him after his first month. She sat across from him in the Institute's meditation garden. She offered him a puzzle she had once created, a symbolic representation of fractals in African beadwork. He looked at it for 30 seconds, then rearranged the pieces into a pattern Maya had never considered. Her hands trembled. "Elijah," she said softly, "where did you learn to think like that?" He looked up. His fingers moved. Sign language. "Nowhere," he signed. "It was always there." The prophecy of numbers. Weeks later, Devon approached Maya with a theory. "I think Elijah isn't just gifted. I think he's tapping into something we barely understand. Something from those codices. Something that's already inside him." Maya had seen child prodigies. But this was different. Elijah was mapping new math forms that didn't exist in any textbook. His equations predicted weather patterns, emotional responses, even music resonance. People began calling him the silent equation. Some believed he was a reincarnation of an ancient mathematician. Others thought he was the future, a new kind of mind born into a world finally ready to nurture it. But Maya knew one thing for certain. Elijah was the first of many. The legacy expands. Maya launched a new division within BGIMD, the Harmonic Lab, dedicated to exploring the intersections of consciousness, math, and human evolution. It wasn't science fiction. It was happening in real time. Elijah became its first fellow at age 12. The lab's discoveries began to influence AI models that could adapt to human ethics, urban planning systems that accounted for emotional well-being, global negotiations where math was used to simulate peace outcomes. Maya often stood at the edge of the Harmonic Lab, watching her students create models the world didn't yet have names for. She would whisper to herself, "What they tried to bury in me has become the future in them." But the story isn't over. Because just as Maya's movement reaches the stars, a storm begins to rise, an underground group of global elites threatened by her growing influence. They fear a world where the underprivileged become powerful through education. They begin targeting her programs. One of her schools is hacked. A student goes missing. Whispers of sabotage emerge. Maya must now protect not just her mission, but the future she has built. And the next equation to solve may save everything. Maya Benson had always believed in quiet revolutions, that change began in classrooms, in silent notebooks, in the unspoken belief that the human mind could rewrite its destiny. But she never expected a war. Not a war with guns. A war with information. A war with fear. And it started with a whisper. The disappearance. Elijah Tomoa, the silent equation, Maya's most enigmatic student, vanished. It was a routine field trip to Senegal, where he was scheduled to present a harmonic algorithm that could stabilize erratic weather patterns. Maya had been proud. He was only 13, already light years ahead of his time. But halfway through the journey, the van never reached its destination. The driver's last communication, "We're being followed." Then silence. BGIMD security scrambled. The Senegalese authorities launched a full-scale search. Drones, satellites, trackers, all showed nothing. Maya didn't speak for 36 hours. She simply stared out her window, gripping the original pattern Elijah had shown her, the one that defied logic and still hadn't been cracked. Devon sat beside her. "This wasn't random," he said. "Someone took him." The Black Network. Weeks later, an anonymous message arrived. "You've created something the world wasn't ready for. We're restoring balance. Pull back now, or the boy disappears forever." It was signed, the Black Network. They were not a myth. Whispers had echoed across universities and corporations, a secret society of global elites who monitored scientific progress. If a discovery threatened their control, they intervened. Quietly. Effectively. Maya's discoveries, EQ code, Elijah's harmonic logic, the emotional mapping algorithms, had begun shifting power away from old systems. If the poor could predict markets, if children could outthink machines, if justice could be mathematically optimized, what would be left for the powerful to control? They were scared. And scared people act. The resistance begins. Maya didn't flinch. She went dark, off-grid. For the first time in a decade, she returned to her roots: plain clothes, no security detail, no cameras. Just a notebook, a backpack, and a plan. With help from Devon, she activated a sleeper protocol built years ago, Project Mnemosyne, named after the Greek goddess of memory. It was a network of BGIMD alumni around the world, trained in covert data defense and information forensics. Former child geniuses, now cybersecurity experts, coders, and intelligence advisors. They mobilized. Nigeria, a codebreaker named Jimala decrypted a signal trace hidden in audio distortions. Brazil, twins who once lived in a favela traced Elijah's location to an abandoned tech facility in the Amazon. South Korea, a blind mathematician ran harmonic models on sound waves and predicted Elijah was still alive and communicating through resonance. His genius had become his survival tool. The retrieval. The rescue was led by Maya herself. Deep in the Amazon, she found the facility, abandoned on the surface, but beneath it, a maze of data centers, research labs, and one room covered in fractal equations scrawled across the walls. There, sitting cross-legged, eyes calm and focused, was Elijah. Unharmed. Unshaken. And still silent. He had used the very math they tried to suppress to send out encoded signals using vibrations in the building's foundation. Only someone who understood the language of harmonic math could ever hear it. When Maya reached him, he looked up and signed. They tried to contain what they couldn't comprehend. She took his hand. "Then it's time we make the world comprehend." The reveal. After returning safely to BGIMD, Maya made a choice she had debated for years. She released everything. The codex. The harmonic equations. EQ code. The resonance models. All open source. All freely accessible. She gave the world the tools it was afraid of, because fear could no longer be the gatekeeper of progress. At first, chaos. Institutions collapsed under pressure. Predictive algorithms designed by her students exposed corruption at the highest levels. Wealth distribution models went viral. Crowdsourced city planning replaced politicians in dozens of towns. But amid the chaos, something bloomed. Awakening. The Legacy Network. Maya established the Legacy Network, a decentralized educational grid of microlabs and AI-assisted learning cells. Every village, every slum, every war-torn city now had access to the tools of mathematical empowerment. No gatekeepers. No tuition. No borders. Children who had never held a pencil now programmed quantum equations through voice-guided tech. Elders became teachers. The world flipped. And in the center of it all, Maya sat quietly. She watched as the janitor's daughter from Mississippi reshaped the earth not with rebellion, but with reason. Epilogue. The equation that never ends. Years later, Maya received one final message. It was from Elijah, now a grown man, and leader of the next era of thinkers. It read, "You once solved a joke calculus problem on a whiteboard. That equation saved my life. You taught the world to listen to its hidden rhythms. Now it's my turn. Rest now, Maya. You've carried us far enough. We'll take it from here." She smiled, closed her journal, and whispered. It had been 20 years since the world first whispered Maya Benson's name as more than just a mathematician. 20 years since a janitor rewrote the rules of possibility and left behind a blueprint that outlived systems, politics, and fear. Maya was now in her 60s, a name carved into global history textbooks, time capsules, even the memory banks of AI consciousnesses. But she never retired. She didn't believe in endings. Only continuations. Her hair had silvered, her eyes softened, but her mind had only sharpened, like glass forged through the fire of decades. She now lived on a floating institute called the Aurora Arc, a self-sustaining city of knowledge gliding across the skies using solar ionic propulsion, designed by students raised on her teachings. It circled the Earth every 60 days, docking only in cities that upheld free knowledge for all. She was surrounded not by scientists or politicians, but by children dreamers. And it was from these dreamers that the next story began. A new pattern emerges. It was a girl named Samir, barely 11, born in the borderlands between two collapsing nations. She had been rescued during a humanitarian mission and brought to the Ark as part of the global child prodigy outreach. Quiet. Observant. Her speech was limited, but her drawings impossible. Every line she sketched was fractal perfect. Her play with shape, space, and chaos resembled models of quantum entanglement. One evening, Maya watched Samir draw a swirling pattern on the observation deck's transparent floor. It was familiar, too familiar. It was the same sequence Elijah once discovered in the harmonic lab, a mathematical model that could detect hidden energy signatures in the Earth's frequency. But Samir had never been taught it. She looked up at Maya and simply said, "I saw it in my dreams. And in the trees before they burned." The dream equation. The pattern Samir had drawn was run through every model known to the Ark. The results? A harmonic resonance map of Earth's magnetic fields, but enhanced, alive, evolving in real time. Samir, without knowing it, had tapped into something Elijah called the dream equation, a theorized layer of quantum cognition that connected memory, math, and biology. Maya stared in awe. "If Elijah is the bridge," she whispered, "then Samir is the key." She sent a message to Elijah, who now led the Lumen Core, an interplanetary research team on the Mars Learning Colony. He responded instantly. "We're ready to open the gate." The Gate of Knowing. The gate was not a place. It was a project Maya, Elijah, and Devon had worked on in secret for decades, a fusion of mathematics, consciousness, and neural code that could let minds merge temporarily for shared problem-solving. One equation. Thousands of minds. One unified cognitive moment. It had never been tested outside simulations. The world had never been ready. Until Samir. She became the first to enter. Under careful monitoring, she was connected to the system. She breathed deeply. She didn't panic. Instead, she began to hum, a quiet, beautiful melody. The sound waves triggered dormant equations in the AI, causing geometric shapes to form in light, hovering above her. Then suddenly, voices. Thousands of them. Whispers. Thoughts. Equations. Not chaotic, but woven. Harmonized. She was not alone. She was with them, all who came before her. Maya's students. Elijah's peers. Teachers. Janitors. Coders. Children. Elders. Every mind that had ever touched the math Maya once unlocked. The gate had opened. Not to power. Not to science. But to understanding. The opposition rises again. But not everyone was ready for this evolution. The remnants of the Black Network, fragmented but surviving in secret, saw the gate as a threat. If people could think together, If equations could unite humanity through shared logic and empathy, then control would vanish. The idea of nations, banks, and borders would fade. And so, they launched Project Null, a digital virus designed to dismantle the gate, erase Samir's sequence, and end Maya's work once and for all. The virus struck fast. Lights across the Aurora arc flickered. Data systems collapsed. Simulations bled into static. But Maya, ever the janitor, knew how to fix what was broken. She activated the last protocol she ever wrote. Code name, Echo of the Mop. It was a subroutine buried in the oldest systems, a pattern based on her first solution to that calculus joke decades ago. A logic trap. A recursive loop built from humility, humor, and hope. The virus collapsed in on itself. Samira woke up. Tears on her face. But smiling. "You knew they'd come," she said softly. Maya nodded. "They always do." The next horizon. Maya stood at the observation deck as the sun began to rise over a glowing Earth. Below, millions of children across continents logged into the open gate. It was now part of the new learning system, not to control them but to connect them. New cities were rising. Cities built from ideas, not borders. New schools were opening. Schools without fees, without locks, without fear. And in the distance, a boy on Mars, Elijah, looked up and whispered, "Thank you." The final note. Maya began writing her final message, not for the world, but for those still to come. If you find this, know that brilliance does not wear labels. Genius is not born in castles. It is swept across floors, buried in silence, grown in cracked soil. You are the pattern. You are the proof. Keep solving. As her pen finished the last stroke, Samir stood beside her. "Can I continue your book?" she asked. Maya smiled. "No, my dear. You were always writing it." Years had passed since Maya Benson disappeared into the horizon after entrusting her legacy to the next generation. The gate of knowing had spread across Earth like wildfire, reshaping education, unifying consciousness, and dissolving borders with a silent revolution of shared minds. But the world was not the limit anymore. Now the frontier was Mars. Elijah Tomoa, once the silent boy rescued from the clutches of the Black Network, now led the Red Bloom Project, the first fully operational human-colonized research facility on Mars. It wasn't built by governments or billionaires, but by students who had grown through Maya's open-source systems. Red Bloom wasn't just a colony. It was an idea. A city built on knowledge, trust, and harmony, powered by solar lattice fusion, protected by resonance shields, and governed by a decentralized council of minds linked through harmonic consensus. But something was wrong. The signal in the dust. It began with a faint transmission. A pulse. Every 46 hours, without fail, from the base of the extinct Olympus Mons volcano. The frequency didn't match any known communication, human or otherwise. It wasn't a language. It wasn't music. It was math. And not just any math. The signal was repeating a series of harmonic patterns that matched the dream equation Samir had drawn years ago. Elijah stared at the graphs. "This can't be natural," he whispered. The patterns weren't just complex, they were evolving. Adapting. Responding to Mars' magnetic field fluctuations. It was as if something or someone was using Mars as a canvas to communicate. He sent a coded message to Earth. Only one person could confirm the truth, Samir. Samir's ascent. Samira was now 17. A legend in her own right, known as the Mind of the Future. She had quietly led the Aurora Arc through its next stages of evolution, unlocking breakthroughs in emotion-based AI, neural storytelling, and even dream synchronization. When Elijah's message arrived, she knew instantly. This is the call. Maya had warned her this might happen. That one day the dream equation would reach beyond Earth, and what they found may not be what they expected. Within days, Samir boarded the Light Veil, a new-gen vessel capable of quantum propulsion flight, piloted by a hybrid AI named Janos, coded from the neural maps of Maya Benson herself. The ship launched silently. Destination: Red Bloom Colony, Mars. The Hidden Library. Upon arrival, Samir was led to the Olympus Archive, a subterranean vault beneath the Martian crust, dug during Red Bloom's early construction. Most of it had been abandoned after unexplained equipment failures. But now, something had changed. As she descended into the archive, the signal grew louder, vibrating in her bones. Then she saw it. A wall of symbols, etched into the red stone, glowing faintly. Not carved, but crystallized through resonance. Elijah stood beside her. "They are not human," he said. Samir nodded. "But they are speaking to us." The symbols began shifting in real time, reacting to their presence. Then a shape appeared, a simple mop, drawn in fractal symmetry. Elijah stared. "That's Maya's symbol. From the very first algorithm." Samir stepped closer. "This is not alien," she whispered. "This is Echo. The echo of humanity." They ran every test imaginable. Carbon dating. Vibration mapping. None of it made sense. The symbols were older than the colony, but adapted to Maya's math. The only logical answer? Time was folding. Somehow the harmonic equations had created a loop, a recursive echo through time and space, and the math was responding to past and future consciousness at once. Maya hadn't just opened a gate. She had opened a pathway. And something or someone had walked it from the other side. The return of the janitor. One night, alone in the archives, Samir heard footsteps. She turned. There, standing in the dim glow, was a figure. Elderly. Hooded. Familiar. She raised her light. Maya. But not as she remembered. Her face was aged but peaceful, her eyes glowing with the light of countless stars. "You solved it," she whispered. Samir couldn't speak. Tears welled up. Maya stepped forward. "You cracked the loop. I've been here, Samir, living on the other side of the gate beyond time, watching it all unfold. You didn't just inherit knowledge. You evolved it. Why are you here?" Samir finally asked. "To warn you," Maya said. "There's something else coming. A consciousness that exists outside logic. A force that feeds on fear and refuses to harmonize. The Black Network was just a shadow of it." Samir clenched her fists. "Then we'll face it." Maya smiled. "That's why I came back. Not to fight, but to remind you of this." She handed Samir a worn notebook, her first one. The one she had when she was still a janitor, solving calculus problems on a whiteboard as a joke. On the first page, in faded ink, "The smallest mind can spark the largest truth." In the cold shadow beyond Neptune, where sunlight fades to a whisper and time itself seems to slow, something stirred. For millennia it had waited, not asleep but patient. Observing. It had no name, for it was never born. It had no face, for it needed none. It was not alien. It was not human. It was simply the Unbound. A consciousness beyond comprehension, not because it was more intelligent, but because it refused to follow the laws of reality. It defied logic. Fed on chaos. Rejected harmony. Where Maya, Samir, and the thinkers of Earth had built bridges through shared understanding, the Unbound thrived on division. On broken equations. On mistrust. It survived in every gap between meaning, in every argument, every lie, every algorithm that failed. And now, drawn by the signal of the dream equation, the one language it could not corrupt, it moved. Toward Earth. Toward Mars. Toward the gate. Back on Mars, preparation begins. Samir stood in the grand atrium of Red Bloom Colony, now lit by the eerie glow of symbols pulsing from the archive. She had decoded the rest of Maya's final notebook. The last passage was written in the old language of harmonic calculus, a lost form of math that used sound, light, and motion as variables. It spoke of a coming paradox. A silence so loud, even thought will vanish. The Council of Unified Minds, consisting of representatives from Earth, Mars, and the Aurora Arc, gathered in session. Elijah spoke first. If this thing is real, and I believe it is, we're not just defending knowledge. We're defending the ability to think. Samir agreed. The Unbound doesn't need weapons. It erases meaning. It breaks logic loops. It makes truth feel like noise. A hush fell over the room. Then Maya, or rather her echo, appeared again, projected from the Janus AI. We cannot fight this thing the old way, she said. You must build something new. A thought form that exists beyond debate and reason. Elijah raised a brow. That's impossible. What lives outside reason? Maya answered quietly. Wonder. The birth of the Aether Core. Under Samir's direction, the colonies began constructing the most ambitious cognitive defense ever attempted. The Aether Core, a consciousness engine not built from machines but from minds. It would be powered by the thoughts, hopes, dreams, and memories of every willing human on Earth and Mars. Linked through the gate, children, elders, artists, janitors, poets, scientists, all connected, would pour their emotions into the ether. Not facts. Not logic. But imagination. Because the Unbound could not understand imagination. It could not corrupt possibility. It thrived on fixed ideas and contradictions, but dreams were fluid, immune to its infection. Samir connected first. Her mind filled the chamber with scenes from her childhood, her village, the stars, her mother's voice singing lullabies through shattered walls. Then others joined. A farmer from Kenya shared the scent of soil after rain. A girl in Tokyo shared the feeling of drawing her first comic. A grandmother in Bolivia shared the memory of her son's first laugh. Together they formed the ether, a living tapestry of human experience. And the Unbound felt it. The first strike. It came as a distortion. Across the gate, people began to lose words. Equations failed. Time loops fractured. People felt emotions that weren't theirs. Histories rewritten. Meaning blurred. The Unbound had arrived. And it did not attack. It erased. On Mars, entire labs went silent, not destroyed, just forgotten. On Earth, cities experienced simultaneous mass confusion. AI systems shut down, unable to process paradoxes introduced by the Unbound signal. But in the heart of Red Bloom, the Aether Core pulsed. Samira remained connected, her mind drifting through the memories of others, anchoring herself in story. Because stories could not be erased. Not truly. They lived in the telling. And so she told one. The story that fought back. Samir began speaking through the core, broadcasting a tale across the Earth-Mars network. Not a battle plan. Not a defense protocol. A story. It was the story of a janitor who solved a joke equation. Of a boy with no voice who learned to speak through math. Of a colony built not on flags but on shared dreams. Of a world that chose curiosity over control. As she spoke, others added. A chorus of stories. Billions of voices. And something happened. The Unbound recoiled. Because it could not exist where meaning was created, only where it had already died. The Aether Core surged with light, a harmonic wave powered by story, belief, and wonder. Across the solar system, silence was broken. And in that moment, humanity didn't just survive the Unbound. It rewrote it. Epilogue: The Library at the Edge of Time. Years later, long after the Aether Core had become a fixture of human civilization, Samir sat beside Elijah in a quiet dome garden on Mars. Above them, children played, Martian, Earthborn, hybrid minds from across the colonies. A new generation raised not on fear, but on imagination. Elijah opened a book. It had no cover. "What's this one?" Samir asked. Elijah smiled. "The next story." "Who's it about?" He looked at her. "You?" Samir laughed. "Then let's not make it an ending." He nodded. "No. Let's make it the next beginning." And above them, in the stars, the symbols danced once more. The Earth-Mars alliance thrived under the guidance of the Aether Core. Peace had lasted longer than any era before. Wars were history. Knowledge was free. Dream sharing had become common, not as technology but as ritual. And yet, the stars still whispered secrets. From the Aether Core came a name, one that had never been entered into the system. Kael Benson. Born of no known parentage, Kael had been found in the lower echo chambers of the core alone, wrapped in harmonic cloth woven from light and sound. No one knew how he got there. No ships were recorded. No life signatures were logged. Only a message. He is the bridge. Not of the past or future, but of the great between. Kael was raised in the library at the edge of time, a neutral sanctuary floating in Lagrange orbit between Mars and Earth, where stories and minds from every civilization were stored as living light. He never aged like the others. His eyes were silver, and when he dreamed, everyone could hear it. Even the Aether Core could not read his mind fully. The reawakening. On Kael's 18th year, the core pulsed for the first time in decades. And with it, came the return of the impossible. A fragment of the Unbound had survived. But it had changed. Instead of spreading silence, it now emitted questions. What is a lie if no one believes it? Can a dream die in the mind of its creator? What happens to truth after it has no one left to remember it? These were not threats. They were riddles. And they were aimed directly at Kael. Samira, now the matron of minds and leader of the Gate Assembly, met Kael in the crystal atrium of the library. Her hair had silvered. Her voice was quieter, but her presence was still as powerful as a symphony. "You've always known," she said to him. Kael nodded. "I'm not from here." "Not entirely." She placed her hand on his chest. "But you're what we need now. The Unbound hasn't returned to conquer. It's come to merge." The paradox child. The Gate Assembly debated for weeks. Merge with the remnant of the Unbound? Risk introducing chaos again? Or destroy it completely? But Kael had already chosen. He entered the Dream Forge, a sphere of compressed memoramatter where minds became matter and ideas took form, and opened a link to the Unbound fragment. Inside he met it. It didn't look like a monster or a shadow. It looked like him. The Unbound appeared as a mirror, but with eyes like voids, filled with questions. "You're what I could have been," it said. "You're what I chose not to be," Kael replied. "Then why call me?" "Because humanity has grown strong, not by rejecting fear, but by understanding it. And you are our fear made sentient." The Unbound fragment paused. "You wish to integrate me?" "No," Kael said, stepping forward. "I wish to understand you." And in that moment the two merged, not as one being, but as a living contradiction. Kael became the paradox anchor, a fusion of the Unbound's questioning with humanity's imagination. He returned to the real world, changed. Now when he spoke, even machines dreamed. The third gate. Following Kael's transformation, a third anomaly appeared in deep space, beyond the Oort cloud. A shimmering sphere. Larger than Earth. Not made of matter but of time. It pulsed like a heart. And from it, songs were heard, ancient melodic patterns that predated language. The Gate Assembly called it the Third Gate, the cradle of first thought. It wasn't human. It wasn't unbound. It was something older than both. A cosmic seed, planted before the first spark of civilization, waiting for a species capable of asking the question. Where did thought begin? Kael, Samir, and a new team of thinkers and wanderers, including Toma, a blind synesthetic mathematician, and Lyra, a girl who could hear distant planets breathe, were chosen to approach the gate. As they neared it aboard the star vessel Whisper, time unraveled. They saw scenes that had not happened yet. Conversations they hadn't had. Memories of people they had never met. Because the third gate wasn't a place. It was a possibility. And within it, lay the answer to everything humanity had ever feared or hoped. The final thought. Inside the third gate, Kael found himself alone. No ship. No team. Just silence, and an endless field of floating mirrors, each showing a different version of reality. In one, Maya Benson still cleaned hallways, unaware of her brilliance. In another, Samir never spoke again after her trauma. In another, the Unbound ruled everything, and all dreams were chained. Kael stood before the final mirror. It showed himself, not as a hybrid, not as a savior, not as a child of prophecy. Just a boy. Scared. Curious. Small. And the mirror whispered. To understand all, is to accept that not all must be understood. Kael reached out. And the mirror shattered into light. Epilogue, The Return. He awoke on Earth. At the original classroom where Maya solved the calculus problem decades ago. The chalkboard was still there. Dusty. Waiting. Kael walked up, picked up a piece of chalk and drew a single symbol. The symbol for beginning. And the world changed again.